Hello, this is Richard Lowe with the Leaders and Their Stories podcast. I am the ghostwriting guru and the writing king. I'm here with Nikhil, and he's going to talk to us about his book, about his TED Talk that he's done, and about how to transform a business. Can you introduce yourself?
Sure. It's a pleasure to be on this show, Richard. And I am Nikhil Raval, based here in India. And essentially, my background or my story, I could say it's kind of broken up into two buckets. I spent my early childhood day growing up in India, which is one part of the story. And then I moved over to the US, where I have lots of extended family. So I finished my education, worked there for a good decade or so in financial services, and then came the next part of my life, or the professional life, when I moved back to Asia. And that's when I forayed into consulting leadership. And that's sort of my second innings, if you will, making the pivot from the financial world to the leadership world, designing programs, delivering programs. I headed a company which did that globally for many, many years, was number one in their space. I had a chance to meet lots of great leaders across Asia. I was a visiting faculty at many good places, but over the years, that's given me a perspective of what is it like from the ringside when you think about leadership. So we can talk to some of that. And of course, I went from that corporate innings to the last part of my sort of now the next part of my working life, which is on my own. And that's where I've done a bunch of other things. One of them is, of course, my book, podcast, TED Talk, and so on. So that's briefly a little bit about me.
Gotcha. That's very, very interesting. It sounds like quite a career path. I'm curious about something. You said India is part of Asia, which I know it is officially, but I often think of it as its own continent because the Himalayas and things are in the way. How do you think of it?
It is absolutely correct. When you think about, it is a country, but it's often also, kind of labeled as the Indian subcontinent, for the simple reason it is diverse like no other place in terms of, the languages and the dialects and the food and the religions. And so I think it's country into many countries, and like any place, and I know, having lived in the US for many years, there's a culture and a subculture if you go from, say, New York to Texas, or to, say, California, or even Florida, for example, right? But this takes it a few notches up. And yeah, it's very diverse. You could be from one part of the India traveling to the other part of the India and have to worry about a language, although there are some certain national language. English is also a language, but just gives you the perspective of diversity. And yeah, we're one country where it's we've got the ocean on three sides, and the Himalaya range is on one side. So it's quite beautiful as well.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm a geologist by background from when I was in school. That was my major. One of the things I know is the Himalayas a few million years ago were their own continent, and they slammed into the Asian continent recently, and that's why the Himalayas are there. That's the subcontinent pushing the mountain up. I mean, we don't want to talk about this much, but it is fascinating to me how it really is a continent that's butting up on another continent.
Yes.
Interesting
Yes.
stuff. But that's way off topic.
No problem. We can talk more, but that's fine. We'll maybe on another.
Yes, it's just interesting to me. All right, so you've written a book and you're working on a second one. So what's that? Why did you write a book?
Yeah. So the first book, or the book that you're referring, Richard, is called Target Gen Z,
All
and
right.
this was published in the year 2021. And this was right in the middle of COVID time. And it was kind of done twofold. As I said, I had concluded my corporate innings in 2019, 2020, went on my own, and I did a bunch of things. I had given a TED Talk, and 2020 is a bit of a mixed year. I lost my father, who was aging and had some health issues. And immediately after his passing away, I wanted to kind of do something in his honor, in his memory. And so I thought a book is one way to do it beyond some other things. And of course, but I had no idea where to begin. And I wish I had known you to come to you and get some guidance. But anyway, I took a course. I learned from a few friends, and I actually went through, how and what goes into writing a book. But when I began to think about a topic, I was quite overwhelmed, like with any first time author would be. So, there's just this mindset that what are you going to write when there's so many experts out there? But, looking back, I said, look, I've got about 15 years in the leadership space now. What can I write which can be of more curiosity rather than just another book? And therefore, I thought I'll talk about what isn't perhaps as much of a mainstream then, and it is still something that of curiosity, which is the Generation Z. And so it's a cohort which we can talk a little bit about, which is entering into the workforce. The eldest of the Gen Z is probably about 27, which means that they're relatively younger than the other generations. And there is a lot of curiosity about them that, okay, how do you hold on to them? How do you motivate them? All the stereotypes that are going, about every generation. So I did the research. I saw that most of the books were sort of in the Western context. And so it wasn't a very typical academic kind of a book, but it was more like a memoir of what I saw from my leadership consulting
Okay.
over the last decade or so. And then I share my stories of what clients do to bring in young talent, to hold on to young talent. And so that's essentially what the book is about. It's a bird's eye view. There is so much in the layering of understanding Gen Z, but I really talk about the context of generations. I talk about certain topics like how do they learn, how do they look at brands, and so on. So yeah, it's been doing reasonably well. Incidentally, US is the number one market where it's highly followed by India. And that's a brief about the Gen Z. We have two Gen Z boys at home, and given the COVID time, I was also getting a chance to know them a little more closely. And so that was another inspiration to look at the Gen Z generation. So that's what the book is about.
Well, I think that's a very, very good topic. First of all, condolences on your father. And it sounds like a great topic for a book. One thing that I do in ghostwriting is you find the point of the spear. You can't make a book that's about everything. So you find something that's unique that you have an audience for that wants to hear that stuff. That's one of the first things that we search out when you engage me in a ghostwriting contract. And it sounds like you did that on your own, which, kudos to you. That's a hard thing to do, and most beginning authors don't do that well because they think the common myth is I want to write it to as many people as possible because then obviously there's more people who are going to read it. That's counterintuitive and that's completely wrong. You want to write it to a particular pinpoint audience, which in this case I gather was corporate people who are going to hire Gen Z. It would be your audience, and that's super valuable because it's getting even bigger now. But I'm sure that when I was growing up, my parents or the people I work for had some of the similar comments about us kids, like they don't want to work, they're lazy, la 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 la. I'm sure that all came up. So a lot of what I'm hearing now is stuff that I heard my parents say, who were of the boomer generation. Actually, whatever the previous generation was, they were part of that. I think it was called the greatest generation from World War
The
II,
silent generation.
the
Yeah.
silent generation. And that era. So they said the same kind of things. That generation's lazy. That generation doesn't want to work. I don't understand these kids these days. That stupid music. So it's
Yeah.
not different, but
Yeah,
it is
every
different.
generation kind of thinks about how how hard or how tough they had it, and when they see the next generation, right? But and we all have reasons to justify it, right? And I write this about it in my own book too. That when I saw my father struggle, I don't think I did as much because the second generation was much more blessed with the effort that they took. And then I tell about how good even my son has it. He has it even, he doesn't have to worry about anything. And so yeah, it's the context which kind of creates that mindset.
Yeah, yeah. And you said difficulties. One thing that I do to keep things straight in my mind, sometimes I think, oh my God, I have all these problems and they're horrible and stuff. And a lot of people say that. But then I think, okay, I'm not in Ukraine where bombs are falling on me every day, and I'm not in Nigeria where people are starving, and I'm not in name the country where people are having name the problem
Yeah,
or name the city or whatever. I'm got first world problems, and it puts it in context. It's like,
yeah,
okay, I'm having a problem with this or this or this, but it's nowhere near what other people are going through. It's not to lessen my problems. They're still problems to me, but and not to lessen anybody else's problems, but I don't have to worry about getting food tomorrow. I don't have to worry about a sniper sitting on the roof waiting to shoot me. Those things are not my problems.
yeah.
So,
You said it so well, I think, Richard. I couldn't agree more. And I think it's just a perspective that we need to build and pass it on to the next generation, right? I think we all have reasons to complain and feel bad and say I had a bad day, but our bad day, it doesn't compare to the bad day of so many people around the world, right? So I think you're absolutely correct.
yeah, we have to look. I mean, even down the street, people are, have worse problems than me. So, in one way, we're blessed, and my parents were blessed. They never really took that attitude. Their problems were, in their mind, were like horrible problems. But looking at them from an exterior point of view, they weren't that horrible. They had food on the table. They they had issues getting finances and stuff, but it wasn't, they weren't not getting food. They weren't getting evicted. All these things weren't happening to them. It's important to put it in context. Then, if you have it in context, then you can make rational decisions based on what's real instead of what's you're you're prejudiced against. And if you think that you have these deep, 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 deep problems, well, then you're going to make decisions from those deep, deep, deep problems. Well, maybe they aren't so deep.
Yeah,
And look at it for real.
absolutely.
For Gen Z, they're going through. They have a lot of problems, and a lot of them are other people, I think, telling them they have problems. Of course, social media is part of that, and then they accept those. And I think it's important for us as more older generations have to look at Gen Z and help them understand that let's look at it for real. Yes, you don't have a job, maybe, or you're having trouble finding a job, but you have a roof over your head. You're living with your parents, maybe, or you're living with a couple roommates, or whatever you're doing. That's better. That's a good place to start. You can relax a little bit, breathe deep. Don't give yourself a heart attack.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. I think that the Gen Z context is different. We can talk to that, Richard, but I mean, their context, we can go into it, but their context is unique in its own way. They've seen things like, the Me Too movement. They've been born into the internet. They've seen the climate crisis. They're seeing, they've seen 9/11. They've seen now, a war, a full-blown pandemic. So there's a handful that they've seen,
right.
and they're seeing fake news. So I think again, one could say that well, how is it different? And now the AI revolution is there, and so much more. But yeah, I think every context has its own sort of positives as well. Like I think we look back from the past, we can look at to say that this generation is so much more tech savvy because they were surrounded and born into technology, right? I mean, right from childhood, they know devices. They cannot live without devices. So I think it's kind of a pro and a con, and like you say, every generation makes it on the other side. It seems like the most toughest thing to do at the moment, right? But retrospectively, it's something that we have to reflect and say that no, that wasn't as bad.
Well, I think Gen Z has one advantage/disadvantage that we didn't have, and that is social media and the massive amounts of media from video games. We didn't have video games. I didn't have video games. Um, to mobile phones. I mean, that's brand new. We had phones that were actually shared among the house. There were party lines. This is what they were called. And you pick up the line, your dad might be listening in the other room.
Mhm.
We didn't have mobile phones at all. All this technology and all of the social changes that go along with it, we didn't have to fight that. But even worse, that's changing fast. Who do you believe? That's one question that even I have is there's so much media out there. Who do you believe? It's getting harder and harder to find that primary source, the who has the truth. What is the truth? I mean, is it what you find out on social media? Is it what you find out on LinkedIn? Is it what you find out from your friends, from your political group? What is the truth? Probably
Yeah.
none of the above.
No, that's such a good point, Richard. I think one of the dangers is quite a severe danger. And again, it's just one of those things, as you mentioned, it's technology has been a boom, but I don't limit this to just Gen Z. I mean, I think this applies to us as much, but perhaps
Yeah.
we've never had to be so dependent, or we're not become, I don't want to use the word slave, but now it seems like everything, the AI can give you an answer and you can just churn out a reply to. I mean, I see my son telling me, like, even people drafting emails and assignments, and he was applying to colleges, and even there they say. So I think the need for critical thinking has gone up so much for everybody, because you see one feed from media, you see a counter view to that. And I think because our attention spans are shrinking, right? I think we need to do the homework. And that's what I fear the most more for this generation, just simply because they have, I don't know, maybe a 40, 50-year runway ahead of them, like a work life runway of 4 decades, 3 decades, 4 decades. And therefore, if they see something on a war on one channel and they see something else on another channel, like, and can you get swayed by it? So I think you're absolutely right. Even this whole fact check mission was ultimately taken away because the fact check, they say that, wasn't doing it as objectively as it could have, and it's kind of becoming biased. But you're right. I think that's just advice for everybody today, Richard, is that is to do the critical thinking, doing your homework, and I think we should all keep that in mind.
Well, one of the problems that we have with that is critical thinking is not really taught in school anymore. It used to be. There are logical fallacies. You approach a younger person with logical fallacies, or even an older person with what is a logical fallacy, they're not going to be able to tell you what that is. Sunk cost fallacies, when you run into a lot. I've already spent $1,000 on this. I think it's only another 500, so I'll just go ahead and do the 500 because I already spent it. Well, that's not a reason to spend another 500 because just because you already spent 1,000. The reason to spend another 500 is I think this is a valuable thing, or this is something I need, or whatever. It's working, all of the factual things, or even gut things. But just because I spent it is not. And I had to fight that a lot with my bosses in the past. Well, we've already spent $1.5 million on this, so we just need to finish it because blah, 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 blah. They didn't want to be embarrassed. They blah, blah, they'd want to back down. Whatever. I think that a lot of things are sunk cost and there's other fallacies, and that's just not taught anymore and not understood. You listen to a speech by any politician, name the politician, and you take out the logical fallacies and just the plain emotion without any facts, you probably don't have a speech left. Probably not. And I did that exercise several times in my life, and there was nothing left. There was no facts. It was just emotion and fallacies. And that makes it.
That's such a good point. I think again, so much work has been done. I can think of and tell you stories where we've had people recruiting people just like them and making decisions just the way you see it. And we've seen this time and again, and around the world. And I know that in the U.S. the banks have been guilty of this, and I've seen this in Asia, where you justify bad loans with more bad loans, and then you say that, oh, we're on the tip of recovering this wave. And so I think it's not just important to know the biases, but I think it is important to understand and becoming aware that, okay, you've got some of these and you need to pause, you need to step back, you need to kind of work objectively to be mindful that, look, you're not going to keep doing this, because we did this with a client where they used to take decisions in the same certain way every time. 24 out of 25 people in that room had the same decision making style. They always wanted structured data and individually. So you have structured and unstructured on one axis, individual and group on the other axis. And so when they were wondering why is it that they can't compete faster than their competitors, because everybody wanted to make decisions on their own. They couldn't do it as a group. So it was a revelation for them that, okay, you got 24 out of 25 people working in the same exact way, and then they're looking for people who are like that, right? So you're right. I think so. Then we have to kind of get them to see and log their decisions and get them to see how they can overcome it. But
Well,
that's something, yeah.
Yeah, I can help with that. What you can do with your Chat GPT or whatever your favorite AI of the month is take a transcript of something you listen to, a speech or whatever, put it in that Chat GPT or whatever, and say, okay, tell me all the logical fallacies that are in this.
Beautiful.
Boom, you've got a list of them all, or some of them. It's not always
Yeah.
right. It doesn't always give them all. We do that iteratively a couple times. You'll get the logical fallacies from that, and you'll be able to then make some decisions. Or you could say, give me all of the things that are based on emotion rather than fact. Give me the things here that don't have any factual basis. You can actually ask it questions like that, and it'll tell you. And it's amazing what you find out when you do that. When you put your favorite politician's speeches into the Chat GPT, you're going to find interesting, and you won't like what you find but that's okay. You don't have to like it. It's just facts. So I'm going to move on from that a little bit. So you wrote this book, and you wrote it because you wanted to make a name for yourself. You wanted to put your brand out there, I imagine. Is that true?
Yes. So I think the book, as I mentioned, Richard, I was twofold. When I went on to my own journey, the solopreneur journey, I thought, okay, let's kind of build I was heading a company. I had a nice title. I was working for an American company in India, and everything was there. But when you go on your own, all of a sudden, like, okay, there is this. Okay, you were this in that world, and now all of a sudden you've become who. And so I had a kind of a bucket list that I wanted to go after. One of which was to deliver a TED talk, and I had already seen people kind of in the classroom. But I said, okay, well, how do I do it? So that was a learning experience kind of anyway on its own. And then I said, okay, what more can I do? all both on a personal side and then professionally. So the book came out, and I felt that okay, this is. I honestly didn't anticipate the amount of interest it will create. I just wanted a different topic. I think there wasn't much written about Gen Z in the Asian context, in the Indian context at all. I think I just saw one book. So it was trying to create a niche. And I think I learned more about the Gen Z generation post the book, as we can all kind of, as authors, agree that the book becomes a platform. But then, when I was invited to give talks and, deliver webinars and masterclasses and things like that, I think every company had its own little tweak and twist, right? Where,
Mhm.
they're grappling to hold on, or they're grappling to, not getting excited with manufacturing versus, let's say, consulting. So what I learned from it is that it is just good to have a good book than a perfect book, as I've seen it in some other interviews, because you could take several years, and I don't discount some of the best authors who've written the books that we all can admire, but the purpose of this was to say that you're an author. Get the experience of doing a structured writing, and then of course build yourself through the journey, right? So you can go on my LinkedIn, and I've posted some 50 articles on Gen Z. So every week I would have something on a different aspect of Gen Z. And then of course I did a podcast which was building on what I did at the book. So yeah, it turned out that way. It was never planned.
Well, the interesting thing is when you have a book, you become the expert, and you just demonstrated that in what you just said. You started getting asking on talks. You did all these other things that were related, that were because of the book. You're now the expert. You've written a book. It sometimes doesn't even matter how good the book is, although quality, of course, is better. It just matters that you have one that resonates with people, that you pick the right audience and things like that. That's what I do in my ghostwriting service. Is I write books for people that do exactly what you said. And it's great. It's great to
Yeah.
see that you accomplished that, because it's important. If you're a coach, you need a book. If you're a solopreneur, you need a book. Doesn't have to be a long book. Doesn't have to, doesn't the little book of sales, I think, is only 100 pages long or something. It's a little red book of sales, and it tells you all about sales. It's very famous. Zig
Yeah.
Ziglar's famous for small books. A lot of these authors, they write small books. That's fine. It could be a long
Yeah.
book, could be anything. I'm releasing a book called The Ghostwriting Advantage. It's releasing on the 24th, and it's the same thing. It's from ghostwriting from the client point of view. And I've only found 0 books, maybe 1 book out there on Amazon that's about that. And it's everything about the client, everything from the idea to the marketing and beyond. It's 400 pages long. It's a nice book, and it has all the information that you need to make a decision and how to take advantage of that book and turn it into something real. That goes on sale on the 24th. I mean, you have a second book coming as well.
Yes, I do. And but I think, Richard, just to your point, I wanna underscore what you've said, just for all our sort of aspiring authors. And I say this because you can get into this imposter syndrome, right? That's the word always used, that, oh gosh, what can I write? What will I do? But like you say, it doesn't have to be a big, thick, kind of a big book. And that's what the approach that I took, is to think it like a memoir. So I wrote the stories that I knew, and I could just talk to that. But even go further, to have someone like you who does it as a passion, you've done it for yourself, but even from the client perspective, just to get the end-to-end perspective, because you could have a great big book, but not do anything after it, then there's a problem. You could have conversely a small book, but if you can get it out and market it like we know many authors have, then it could be just what you want. And so you're absolutely correct. I think when I wrote the Gen Z book, the podcast, which is doing like globally in the top 10 in the Gen Z category,
Wow.
because it's very niche, it's very focused, it's heard in over 65 countries now. And then I saw that there is a clear niche in this space. So my second book is about multi-generation workforce. So I move away from Gen Z to talk about all the dynamics of the multi-generation workforce. So as we alluded in the beginning, that you've got in every company at least 3 generations. You got the Z, the Gen Y, or the millennials, and then the Gen Xers. I'm a Gen Xer. And then in many instances, you may even have a boomer in the workplace, or in their late 60s, or let's say even 70s, because people are living longer. So there are some clear dynamics that come about. How do they see communication? How do they see careers? We talk about some of the biases that come on both sides, on the experienced side and on the younger side. And then how do we overcome it? And I'm seeing more and more companies, like the younger people are either leaving because they don't get along with the boss, or the experienced generation is feeling frustrated because they're not able to communicate. Either way, I think so. I dive into some of those aspects
Right.
into the second book, and it's called Generational Fusion. And
Good title.
yeah, that's the title, Generational Fusion. Creating strengths from ages, and that's the full title. But it's releasing in May, and again, the audience is everybody from HR colleagues to just a simple manager, right, who's managing someone of a different generation below or above. And yeah, hopefully this that'll also be useful to everybody.
Yeah, it sounds interesting. I'm at the tail end of baby boomer, and like I think in the last year or two of baby boomer, and or maybe even the first year of millennials. I mean, I'm right on the edge, and it's interesting. First of all, ageism comes into play a lot more than
Yep.
I would have thought. One of the minor factors is why I went on my own as a solopreneur is it's hard to find a job when you're older. I mean, really, really, really hard, like virtually impossible. Even though you've got the experience and you've got the name and you've got the abilities and you've got lots and lots of experiments. I'll give you an example. In the United States, what do you think the most used programming or most prolific programming language is? What powers most of the computers in the United States? It'll surprise you.
Oh, okay. Wow. Okay.
70% of programming is in COBOL. Well, who's going to take a class in COBOL? So older people do COBOL. Well, they're retiring out. So that runs the banks and all the financial institutions. So what's going to happen when there is nobody left and it's not that long off who isn't there to do the COBOL? Going to have to scramble and do some. I mean, you've probably forgotten that you have a million lines of COBOL in your financials running your company. And because it's code that nobody ever wants to look at. It's icky code, icky code. It's off doing stuff that you don't care about. It runs your company, but it's been doing it fine for 30 years, 40 years. That was an amazing. I don't have that's not the exact numbers, but that's an amazing statistic. Is that these older languages, Fortran, COBOL, Ada, C++, these things still run the world, and they're underneath everything else. Who's going to do it? Who wants to do it? I mean, I can't even see somebody who's Gen Z going to college to learn COBOL or Fortran. That ain't going to happen. Not much. But there's some jobs there, though.
No, but you make a good point. I think ageism, Richard, exists is in what I call in the there's a entire chapter on it. I call it the silent discriminator, and I say it that it cuts both ways. So I give examples of all the biases that can happen for experienced people, let's say like you and me, where as you rightly said, we have the ability to, we've seen it, we've led teams, we've done it. Yet for whatever reason, if you still have the desire, but I think there's always this sort of invisible wall that says, and I give specific examples of how either at a certain age in the company people are not given promotions, or they're not hired. And the reverse is also true, where a young person who's very capable sometimes isn't given the opportunity because they say that you don't have enough experience. So I think
Exactly. Exactly.
yeah. So it's one of those things where you have to create a good culture, you have to be a good manager. But ageism, as you rightly said, ageism exists in every sense of the word. And I think depending upon which end of the spectrum you are in, I am sure like we will have experienced it at some point or not.
It's just like any other discrimination, except it's more silent because sometimes you don't even need to interview the guy to know that he's older or younger. It's just apparent in his resume. Oh, I don't even want to interview him. He's 60 years old, you know, or I don't want to interview him. He's only 21.
Yeah.
Or she, whatever. And it's sad because you're basing it. It's sad. All forms of discrimination are sad in that way because you're not judging the person's abilities or their ability to get along with others or things like that. You're judging something that, I mean, I can't change how old I am. Wish I could. Well, I don't know. I was pretty stupid when I was younger. So I don't want to go back to being younger. I want to be younger from where I am now.
Yeah, no, so you're right. I think all the reasons why a promotion is not given, all the reasons why training stops, all the reasons why an assignment is not given, right? And we see the stories on each side. And you're right. I say that for the Gen Z generation, that you have an advantage because you know the technology, but you also have a disadvantage, right? I think Somebody can say that, okay, what does he bring to the table? I don't want him to become good at AI. I want him to be good, right? And the other day, I mean, just to your point, my son's interviewing for some of the schools that he's applying, and he had a one-on-one meeting with one of the admissions officer, and this school is in the US, and they just allow you to do that as an interaction. One of the things that they do is that they don't want a face-to-face conversation. So it's an audio conversation. And we were just starting to think that, okay, why would somebody do an audio conversation in today's day and age? And I think we kind of realized that, look, it can influence, it can influence somebody, right? Good or bad way, based on, if I see somebody and I may have a preconceived notion about he or she and how he dresses and speaks and so on. So I think it was done deliberately to say that, look, I just want to independently from a distance listen to you, help you, and that's it.
All right. Well, we've been going for about 40 minutes. How would you like to, if you have anything you'd like to say to the listeners, sum it up in a few sentences, what would you say?
Yeah, I think just in our conversation for Gen Z, Richard, I would say that, look, this is going to be a cohort which is going to become more and more mainstream in the coming years, depending upon where you are, whether in the US or whether you're in Asia. I mean, in India, it's a very young demographic countries, but in most working economies, they say by 2030, 2040, close to 50% of that cohort will be kind of become mainstream. And I only say this that, okay, if you're in a conference room today, and if you've got 20 people, there's a chance that a majority of the people could be Xers and Ys and a few Gen Zs. But if you fast forward out 10 years out, I think that composition will be very different, right? You will have
Course.
probably half of the room filled with Gen Zs, fewer Gen Ys, and maybe even fewer Gen Xers like me. And so what that says is that simply that, look, it's incumbent upon the manager to get to know them, get to know what inspires them, and I think just as much for the Gen Z to understand the other generations. Again, I think do not get, as you say, go by the hype. I think generations have always existed from our time to think from our children, and take the time to know yourself, take the time to know others, and I think the more you can just keep it simple like that, I think all generations can thrive and work together.
Well, of course, that's what we all have to do is work together. Well, this has been the Leaders in Their Stories podcast. I'm here with Nikhil, and how can people reach you?
Yeah, the easiest way, Rich, to reach me would be on LinkedIn. You can just look me up, Nikhil Raval, and is got the work that I do. I also have a YouTube channel, which is basically the videos of all my podcasts. So you can see the video versions of the podcast, but the podcast itself is called Working with Gen Z, and that's available on all the major platforms. And then, of course, there is my personal website, which is www.learnwisely.in. And this is where you can find what I do and all the resources and the information about the second book coming up soon.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on the podcast. Appreciate it. Like I said, this has been the Leaders in Their Stories podcast. I'm Richard Lowe, the writing king and ghostwriting guru. And this is a daily podcast. So come back and check in. It's on YouTube and all the other places, just like like you did. And I have a website, the Writing King or Ghostwriting Guru. I have two. And you can find me on LinkedIn, Richard Lowe Jr. And there you go. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Richard. Have a great day. Bye.